I want to talk today about a subject that most of us haven't given a whole lot of thought to. In fact, probably most of us haven't even heard of it. Something called transnational law. It goes by other names too, universal jurisprudence. My personal favorite is lawfare, which is, I think, increasingly how international jurisprudence or transnational law are being used against the United States. We just saw an example of it with the announcement in the past few days about a judge in Spain who made his name prosecuting Pinochet on an extraterritorial basis, that is to say, for crimes that all happened allegedly outside of Spain in Chile. Now this judge wants to prosecute 6 former senior Bush administration officials, all of whom were giving the president, in the course of their official duties, their best judgment about some of the most important issues of the day, specifically what kinds of limitations should be imposed on the interrogation of those enemy combatants being held by U.S. forces. These individuals are now being, it appears, prosecuted by the Spanish government, and it really is an open question as to whether justice will be served, especially if what, as a practical matter, happens is, in this application of transnational law, we have people imposing penalties on American citizens for providing advice to the President of the United States, irrespective of what that advice is. And it's not clear that these prosecutors in Spain know what that advice was, but independent of that, how will we get good people serving in our government, providing their best judgments to the president, if in fact at any point some transnational bit of sovereign bench can impose its laws or its sense of what's right and wrong on Americans. The problem here is that it appears that Barack Obama embraces this program of transnational jurisprudence. This is not simply an issue that somebody is overreaching in Spain. This is a problem here, as we can see from the appointment by President Obama of a gentleman by the name of Harold Koh. He's currently the dean of the Yale University Law School, but Mr. Obama wants to have him be the top lawyer in the Department of State, the position of legal advisor in that bureau. And the challenge to those of us who care about the national security of the United States, and specifically the integrity of our constitutional form of government, is Mr. Koh seems to be at least as aggressive in his belief that transnational law needs to be imposed upon us as are many of those who are championing this kind of lawfare overseas. In fact, I'd like to read you a passage from a piece that Mr. Koh put in the Penn State Law Review back in 2006. It's a fascinating depiction of a struggle within the U.S. Supreme Court between what he calls transnationalists or the transnationalist faction, for sometimes even 5 members of the Supreme Court, versus the nationalist faction, 4 and again sometimes 5 in number. Here's what he said. Generally speaking, the transnationalists tend to emphasize the interdependence between the United States and the rest of the world, while the nationalists tend to focus more on preserving American autonomy. The transnationalists believe in and promote the blending of international and domestic law, while nationalists continue to maintain a rigid separation of domestic from foreign law. The transnationalists view domestic courts as having a critical role to play in domesticating international law into U.S. law, while nationalists argue instead that only the political branches can internalize international law. He goes on, The transnationalists believe that U.S. courts can and should use their interpretive powers to promote the development of a global legal system, while the nationalists tend to claim that U.S. courts should limit their attention to the development of a national system. Finally, the transnationalists urge that the power of the executive branch should be constrained by judicial review and the concept of international comity, while nationalists tend to believe that federal courts should give extraordinarily broad deference to executive power in foreign affairs, unquote. Now I ask you, where do you line up on this? Are you in favor of the kind of transnational jurisprudence, the sweeping internationalization of law that clearly Harold Koh has in mind, and presumably the man who is appointing him to a senior position in his administration, Barack Obama? Or do you think that the U.S. Constitution and the laws that flow from it, and such treaties as are absolutely clearly consistent with the Constitution, should be the sole basis for the governance within the United States? I certainly suggest that's the case, and find myself much more comfortable with the nationalists than the transnationalists like Harold Koh, especially when he goes on to say, as he has, that we need to submit the United States to the International Criminal Court, which would, I think, probably make the present exercise with the Spanish judge look like a day at the beach. We're going to see, I suspect, more and more cases brought against American citizens, public servants, military personnel, and the like, if this kind of practice takes hold. He goes one better, Mr. Koh does, John Kerry, who famously said in the 2004 campaign that he thought the United States ought to pass some sort of, quote, global test in order to engage in the use of force. Mr. Koh believes that unless there is a mandate, an explicit mandate for the use of force provided by the UN Security Council, any use of force by the United States would be illegal, including, in his view, the invasion of Iraq. He has opposed virtually every one of the main techniques that the U.S. government has used since September 11 to try to deal with the threat posed to us by Sharia-adherent Muslims seeking through jihad, particularly the violent kind, the destruction of the United States and its government, whether it's the facility for holding those that we capture at Guantanamo Bay, whether it's the interrogation techniques that we've applied, whether it's the surveillance procedures that we've used to monitor enemy communications, whether it's the use of military commissions to try those we've captured. These are all things that you just as soon have the top lawyer in the State Department support, I submit, if in fact his job is advocating America's jurisprudence, not imposing upon us that of foreign governments or international bodies. In short, we're facing a time of testing, not only through the violence that is being wrought against freedom-loving people around the world, but the effort being made, including by some in those free countries, to use lawfare against the United States, to impose their international norms and standards on us through universal jurisprudence. This is a terribly important issue if you care about the unique character of our country, the very essence of American exceptionalism. And I submit we need a man, not Harold Koh, in the top State Department legal office who is an advocate for America's legal practices and traditions, not international jurisprudence.